Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 67 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at OBKiev. Tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media / the Odds Breakers, which we had a few plays up this week on our Facebook. This episode is being sponsored by jazzsports.ag. For a 50% bonus, please visit Jazz Sports and use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can become a patron subscriber, get all that in the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. What a fantastic week in sports betting. Fantastic. College, we are 10-4, up 13 units. Well, the NFL showed its ugly face. We are 4-5-1 and down 2 units. But our NFL units are smaller than college because, well, you see what a shit show the NFL absolutely is as far as officiating and rules and all that good stuff. And we've covered it a lot before, but, I mean, this week, just look at the Barstool Sports guys' Twitter account, and you'll see how ridiculous. Hell, Phil Yates from ESPN is calling it an absolute debacle of officiating. You know, when they make up rules for the Patriots saying his forward motion was stopped, even though it was a split-second play, and it was a fumble but not reviewable. I mean, there's the one where the Cardinals, you know, the defender was actually perfect to catch the ball, and he gets tackled, and they called pass interference on him. I mean, it's like backwards world type thing, you know. The beginning of the Texans game, where Deshaun Watson throws a perfect ball to DeAndre Hopkins. He gets tackled 10 yards before the ball. The ball's probably about 10 feet away, maybe 10 to 15 feet away from him, and they got to review their own bad call, and they magically called it okay. So don't take the NFL seriously if you lose, because, I mean, obviously it's an absolute joke out there. But, I mean, the problem is we love football. We love our fantasy football. We love betting on sports. Football is one of our favorite. But that's why I focus more on college. And I am extremely happy because we had a killer week in college, up 13 units. As a matter of fact, the last 7 days, we were up a total 17 units, 23, 14, and 1, a 62.2%. So extremely happy with the betting out there as it's been going. We already have some plays for next week. So, as a recap, I guess you can start with the Chicago Bears, and they're out of it now completely. We hit the first half under and the full game under, of course, and you heard that on the podcast. That was easy. I mean, this offense is so lethargic that even when they should run the ball, they don't. They throw it, you know. I mean, but you got a quarterback that doesn't really read the defenses that well, and he actually didn't even play all that bad. It was more, you know, Matt Nagy and his weird play calling. Some of his receivers were dropping some stuff too. It was just a team fail, really. Pinheiro misses 2 field goals the first quarter. They should have actually probably won this game if they get to play with the lead. But at the end, the defense tired out, and that's just the Bears for you. You got some terrible play calling. Quarterback's kind of confused out there. The team's just not coming together. They have no tight end that's worth a damn. Missed draft picks consistently. Fangio, after he left, Pagano came in, and he was a big loser on the Colts. So what did the Bears find? They find the biggest losers, and they pay him a lot of money. I mean, it starts with the ownership. So that's what we deal with the Bears. But they're done because the wild card teams beat them. Philly beat them, and LA beat them. They're going to be the wild cards, and they're divisions, and so they're pretty smoked. And obviously Minnesota's there too. They're competing for a wild card, so no chance for them. I prefer, as a fan right now, I hope they tank. I don't want them to win another game. I'd rather have them at least have some draft capital that they can fuck up for 2020. But to recap a little bit of the NFL here, and we have a lot going on here. I want to go a little bit over our power rankings, how they are kind of like a British hierarchy. So before I do that, though, I want to talk a little bit about recapping the NFL. And, you know, it all started out with the Jets and the Redskins. That was a really ugly game. A lot of people had the under in that and the over hit. I mean, that's the problem when you bet the unders in these stinky games. Sometimes their defenses are so bad that they give up a ton of points, and then you get a bunch of garbage points at the end. So it was 34-17 when it was all said and done. The Jets was the sharp side. I just wanted to stay away from the game, but either way, the total didn't hit. I was on the Colts, and they did beat the Jaguars, but I kind of got a weird beat on that under 44.5. I mean, they blocked the extra point, which was great, but the Colts ran it all the way back to the other end zone to get a 2-point conversion, which screwed the under on that. So that was kind of brutal. But, you know, either way, that's the NFL for you. Bills destroyed the Dolphins. The Dolphins was unfortunately a very trendy, sharper bet, but that didn't come to fruition. Obviously, the Bills kind of dominated them. I wanted to bet the Bills. There's so many on the Dolphins that I kind of took myself off of it, but the spot really favored the Bills in my opinion, and the Dolphins couldn't keep winning like that. So the Dolphins are back to sucking, but at the same time, there could be some value on them next week against Cleveland. We'll see. The Cardinals against the 49ers. What a shit show of an end to that game. There's guys in a pile. Someone just flings the ball up in the 49ers end zone, and then the Niners pick it up for a touchdown at the very end of the game because the Cardinals were trying to lateral, obviously. But the guy that flung it was clearly down. I mean, they're all touching each other in this pile. And the officials just don't know what the fuck they're doing, and they still call it a touchdown. So anybody that had the Cardinals plus 9.5 or yet plus 10 and pushed completely got screwed by a system, a company, a regime, the NFL, that lacks complete institutional control. You know, I mean, this is one of those things that the FCC would stop. If it was a corporation and they were trading stock, they would completely come down and say, you guys are being sued because you lack institutional control. You're going to jail. You're going to jail. Well, if it was like that for sports betting, the NFL would be completely screwed. But unfortunately, the Department of Justice, they're too busy trying to kick each other out of office to literally do anything by any means constructive. Broncos versus Vikings. The Broncos, they're up 23-0 and give up 27 unanswered points to the Vikings. I give Cousins some credit the way he did play that second half, but I thought the Vikings were completely toast in that game. I stayed away from betting it, but the Broncos still covered. But I mean, letting the Vikings come back like that was just pathetic. But I'll tell you this, the Vikings, they do have that defense that can put their offense in position to do that. And this was a game that had happened, and would have been a nice second half bet. I'll tell you this, if I would have been thinking about that. But lots going on. How the hell are the Falcons good again? You know, it's like that Forrest Gump line. It's like, all of a sudden, I don't have to worry about money anymore. Well, and just all of a sudden, out of the blue, the freaking Atlanta Falcons are beating the Saints and the Panthers. It's just the team that looks like they're one of the 3 or 4 worst in the NFL. Now, what the hell are they? 29-3 at Carolina. They go to the Saints and beat them. They go to Carolina and beat them. Now what the hell is going to happen? Are they really this good? I think they're always capable of it. But Jesus Christ, they want to save Dan Quinn. Apparently, where was this effort all year? You know, where the hell was this effort? I'm shocked. But yeah, I bet the Panthers. My power rank said I bet the Panthers. That was my only NFL loss I gave out, I think. And I guess I'll take it. But Jesus Christ, man. For free plays, that is. For free plays. Yeah, it was interesting. Cowboys beat the Lions by 7 points, which Lions just do not have a good defense, apparently. Well, the Bears beat them, so that should tell you everything you need to know. And somehow the Bengals tried their ass off and covered against the Raiders. The Raiders kind of did it to themselves in the beginning. They fumbled the ball, and the Bengals are really motivated to try to get a win there. That's the problem. They're trying to get off the schneid, and that's what happens. It's hard to bet. It's hard to predict that. And the Raiders did enough to win, and they could have scored probably another touchdown at the end, but run the clock out. It's a problem with double-digit double-digit favorites in the NFL. All right, well, that's enough of the NFL here. Lots happened in college, right? How about that Oklahoma-Baylor game? Holy smokes. That game was fantastic. I mean, how did Baylor let them come back? But at the same time, as you'll hear later, there's a misleading score. But Oklahoma just kind of turned their defense on when they had to, and Baylor just did enough choking to let them back in the game. They fumbled the ball a couple times in the second half. They just did everything they could to fuck that one up. And I'm swearing a lot. Jeez, I don't swear a lot in podcasts, but it's just one of those weekends. But maybe it's because I just watched the Bears. That's what I think it is. But the Baylor chance of going undefeated. Thought the committee was going to have to rank them 4 after this, and nope. Now the Big 12 is probably on the outside looking in here, but our Baylor ticket's still good at 26.75 to 1 that we gave out a long time ago. All right, next game, we can talk a little bit about Georgia versus Auburn. That was another awesome game. Georgia was up 21-0 for a long time. Auburn scored 14 unanswered towards the end of that game. But Georgia was pretty much in control until then. Georgia turned it on when they had to. Georgia's a top 5 team for sure. Actually, now that Tua's out, Georgia might even be looking themselves in possible college football playoffs here. They control their own destiny for sure. And there's a lot of teams that don't. So I think they're motivated. They're definitely going to be motivated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our power ratings here. Alabama, I could not believe Tua got hurt that game. That was sad. And it was his hip. It wasn't his ankle. It was his hip. He was 14 for 18, 256 yards and 2 TDs. They covered easily. There's a lot of people that bet against Alabama there, and I don't know why. They needed style points because they don't have the schedule to get in. Kind of like, remember, Ohio State kind of got enough style points when they beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship back in 12 or 13, whatever it was. Well, they ended up, Ohio State, I think it was 14 actually, but Ohio State ended up winning it all that year. So, Bama needed it, and we gave that out at 20.5, and it goes all the way down to 17.5. I'm like, what the hell? What the hell are people thinking? I couldn't figure it out, but either way, it was an easy winner, and they still stopped Mississippi State with their defense, but they certainly have some problems now that Tua is out. But now they might be kind of on the undervalued side, which is really exciting. I love to see an undervalued Bama team because it's not like Tua's younger brother or Mac, whatever his name is, can't go in there and do the job. Mac Jones, that is. So this is Bama here. So they live through these situations. This is what they do. Looking in the Pac-12, Oregon and Utah took care of business. I mean, Arizona can only score 6 freaking points at Oregon. How awful is that? And they both had both their quarterbacks, Gunnell and Tate, playing that game, and they couldn't do nothing. It was just Oregon turning up their defense. Herbert was 20 for 28. I cannot wait till that Pac-12 championship. It's really sad that Utah or Oregon is probably not going to be in the championship because of the extreme, bias, and the fact that Oregon lost to Auburn, Utah lost to at USC, but it's just this is why I think there should be an 18 playoff, and I tweeted out earlier what the 18 playoff probably should be for the most part, depending upon the rest of the season and how it pans out. One of my losers was Minnesota versus Iowa's over. I missed it by 2 points or so. So Minnesota blew it, and missing that extra point killed them. They also had to blow a timeout late in that game because of a play clock. I always would have took the play clock in that situation. I think the coach messed up a little bit, but I mean, it's not like it's something you plan for. It's just I'm not going to take anything away from PJ Fleck there for that. Tanner Morgan was pretty good. Had a lot of yards, 368 yards through the air. But they just were not efficient in the red zone there. And, I kind of expected a little bit more of a high-scoring game, but their red zone efficiency kind of screwed it up, and Iowa kind of milked the clock at the end. But either way, as a Badger fan, it was great for us because we now have a shot to beat Minnesota in Minnesota to go to the Big Ten championship to get our asses kicked by Ohio State again. But either way, as a betting standpoint, I don't care because I have Minnesota 5-1 to win the Big Ten West, and I have Wisconsin, if you remember, 3.75 to win the Big Ten West, so it's a winner either way. And I have Minnesota at 70-1 to win the Big Ten, and I have Wisconsin at 15-1 to win the Big Ten. So it's going to be a hedge anyway, that game, no matter what, but we're going to profit a little bit from winning their side of the Big Ten. Penn State, well, they had a little scare there. Indiana played them tough. I mean, really tough. 20-14 at half. Then they pulled away a little bit. Then Indiana kind of scored a little bit towards the end. It was a one-touchdown game for a long time, and it ended up, Penn State only won by a touchdown. So, we took Indiana plus 15 and a half. We got plus 15 and a half, and that was definitely a good game for us. But Penn State has a bigger challenge against Ohio State, and I think I have a plan on how I'm going to bet this game. And if you remember from last year, then you might know the secret sauce. And then Florida destroyed Missouri. That was no surprise. Missouri's not too, well, it was. I actually thought Missouri was going to stand up. I put a small bet on Missouri, one of my other losers. But either way, there's kind of a blown call by the officials in that game. Happens less in college some reason than it does in the pros. But either way, Missouri had their chances, and they just couldn't put it together. Michigan blew out Michigan State by 34 points. We saw that coming. Shea Patterson's looking better and better. 384 yards and 4 TDs. I would not want to be playing Michigan right now. Well, unless you're Ohio State, I guess it don't matter. But, Michigan's just kind of red hot right now. A lot of sharp money was on Navy. This thing all went from 9.5 down to 7. Notre Dame blew them out and had them blown out 38-3 by halftime. It was just one of those things like, oh, that's right. Navy hasn't played anybody except in their American Athletic Conference. That's right. You're playing. That's right. You're stepping up in class, playing Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame's going to allow them to do anything. That was pretty much intimidation factor as well. Well, Texas, they came back against Iowa State, but ended up losing by a field goal at the very end of that game. And Texas did cover the spread. It was a 7-point spread, but that's Texas for you. They are 6-4, 4-3 in the Big 12 now, which was great for our Baylor ticket because now we don't have to worry about this game whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if Baylor's going to try that much. I would not bet Baylor. Memphis, they're looking good. And Appalachian State destroys Georgia State. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot to talk about our Rutgers play. Yeah, I gave that one out on Twitter as well as the premium customers. 52.5 points is just way too much for this type of spot. You knew that most of the third quarter and fourth quarter that Justin Fields and most of the starting lineup for Ohio State wasn't going to play that game. 49-7. I mean, Ohio State could have blew them out by 100 points if they wanted to, but you just knew in the situation that it wasn't going to happen that way, and that's why that 52.5 point dog was so important. Now, if this was the middle of the season and they didn't have Penn State on deck, maybe you don't make that play, but this play screamed 52.5. That's why I was confident, and that's why I took that play. All right, I want to do something a little bit fun here. Looking at the college football power ratings, I kind of thought of it as, there's sections of teams, right? There's sections. And I want to kind of compare them to the order of English noble titles, all right? So, King, Prince, Duke, Marquise, Earl, which is the same thing as a count. Then there's Viscount, Baron. So this is kind of how I look at the system and how it kind of lays out here. So I'm even going to go higher for my number one team. It's a little bit higher than King and Queen because this team I have 3 points ahead of the next one, and that's Ohio State. I think instead of just saying that they're the King and Queen, they're emperor. If there's an emperor allowed to rule the whole world, it would be Ohio State. But being at that, they're the kings, the top king, whatever you want to say. And then the next are just two teams right now. And it is Clemson and LSU. They're the only kings in the very next class. So Ohio State, Clemson, and LSU are all kings. All right. So next, you have your princes, princesses, whatever, the next order of class. And that would be two teams. That would be Alabama and Georgia. They are a step down now. Alabama wasn't, but now they are with Tua's injury. They are a step down from Ohio State, Clemson, and LSU. So there is your next class. Your third class, the Dukes and Duchesses, there's quite a few of them actually, would be Oklahoma, Michigan, Auburn, Wisconsin, Penn State, Oregon, all pretty close to bunched up. To be honest with you, I have Oklahoma above them, but still lower than Georgia. I guess Oklahoma is the bigger one, but I still think there's a big enough space between Oklahoma and Georgia, so they are not princes or princesses. You see them lose to Kansas State. They almost lost to Baylor. Oklahoma is in the Duke and Duchess stage. Okay. So the next set, the Marchess, would be Iowa, Notre Dame, Florida, Minnesota. Okay. I just don't think that Notre Dame, Florida, Minnesota, and Iowa are quite up to Duke and Duchess. Notre Dame, they're the closest. Maybe you throw Notre Dame in with Oregon. I don't know. Notre Dame does have 2 losses. They're pretty good losses at Georgia, at Michigan, but they don't have any real quality wins. As a matter of fact, they barely beat Virginia Tech at home. They're just not quite there yet. So sorry, Notre Dame, but you're in the Marchess type area. The next ranking I have is Viscount. It's Earl. Counts and Earls and Countesses. So the next one would be Texas A&M, Washington State, Baylor, Iowa State, and Memphis. Okay? Memphis deserves to get in there. Abso-freaking-lutely. Memphis looks very tough. I would hate to face Memphis if I was any Power 5 team. They are in the very next steps of being counts and countesses and earls. The next one, Viscount, would be teams like USC, Virginia, Texas, Central Florida, TCU, Boise State, Indiana, Appalachian State. And the next lowest would be teams, well, actually the ranks would be barons and baronesses. Those teams would be Michigan State, Cincinnati, SMU, Navy, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. And the rest are all commoners. But I'll tell you this, if you want to look in the Power 5 conference and look at the complete lowest of the lows, the lower than the bums themselves, the thieves, the invalids, the flops, the failures, the duds, that would be Vanderbilt, Maryland, and Rutgers. I don't even think Georgia Tech and West Virginia are that low. Vanderbilt, Maryland, and Rutgers.
You suck!
Yeah, those teams are awful. And by the way, don't ever let me bet on Vanderbilt again. Ever. All right. Well, that was lame. Let's get right into college football week 12 misleading final scores. And we're going to start right out with Louisiana Monroe versus Georgia Southern. Monroe outgained Southern by 45 yards, yet lost by 32 due to a 3-0 turnover ratio. So some of those were garbage yards, but at the same time, Monroe is better than what they showed. Troy versus Texas State. Troy only outgained Texas State by 55 yards, yet won by 36 points. A 4-0 turnover ratio helped that one. Troy's not that good. Texas versus Iowa State. Iowa State outgained Texas by 136 yards, yet only won by 2 points. A 1-0 turnover ratio wasn't that much. Texas, they really need a bad year to have a great year. Instead of just always returning like half your team, it just seems like half is pretty good and half isn't. It'd be nice if you just have 1 year where you return nobody, you kind of suck, maybe even miss a bowl game, and then next year you're awesome. I don't know. It's just one of those things that's kind of like drafting. It's kind of like going 8-8 in the NFL. You always draft late, like 17th, 18th. And you can just never get over the hump. It was like that in baseball or all sports, basketball. That's why they tank. West Virginia versus Kansas State. Kansas State outgained West Virginia by 102 yards, yet lost by 4 due to a 2-0 turnover ratio. Might be time to fade the Mountaineers again. Georgia versus Auburn. Auburn outgained Georgia by 78 yards, yet lost by 7 points. Now, Georgia was up 21-0 and kind of, put it in prevent a little bit, but it was still a lot of yards to be outgained by. So I wanted to mention that one, but that's not that misleading when that happened. So I definitely wanted to point that out at least. Next game, we have Syracuse versus Duke. Cuse outgained Duke by 116 yards. But won by 23 points. So that's kind of a lot for 100 yards. 3-0 turnover ratio really killed Duke there. And geez, Syracuse is a bad team. What an ugly loss for Duke. Minnesota versus Iowa. Minnesota outgained Iowa 431 to 290. Okay. Yet, only lost that they lost by 5 points. 141 yards of difference right there. 141 yards. So 1-0 turnover ratio wasn't enough. It was just some really bad efficiency in the red zone for Minnesota, and obviously also killed my over on that one. Next game, Rice versus Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State outgained Rice by 81 yards, yet lost by 3 due to a 2-0 turnover ratio. Congrats, Rice, on your first win, by the way. Louisiana versus South Alabama. South Alabama outgained Louisiana by 77 yards, yet lost by 10. Only a 1-0 turnover ratio there. Might be some value on South Alabama coming up next game. Air Force versus Colorado State. Colorado State outgained Air Force by 33 yards, yet lost by 17. Even turnover ratio, so some bad efficiency with Colorado State there. Cincinnati versus South Florida. South Florida outgained Cincinnati by 150 yards, yet lost by 3 with an even turnover ratio. Can you believe that?
Come on, don't bullshit me.
Louisville versus NC State. NC State outgained Louisville by 151 yards, yet lost by 14. A 3-0 turnover ratio saw to that. And Oklahoma versus Baylor. Oklahoma outgained Baylor by 218 yards, yet only won by 3 points. Turnovers were close enough, and hey, that is why I didn't bet this game.
Pal, I'll kiss your boots if you can do it. But to be the man, you gotta beat the man. And I'm saying, woo!
Let's get right into college football week 13 betting spots. And we're going to start. There's actually a lot of them this week. We're going to start right with letdown spots. Iowa hosting Illinois is a letdown spot after beating Minnesota. Oklahoma at TCU is a letdown spot only because it was an exhilarating comeback. Now, we know Oklahoma was favored by 10.5, 11 points anyway, but this just the comeback makes this kind of an emotional win and a letdown spot. Temple at Cincinnati, because Temple, they were dogs to Tulane and won outright. West Virginia hosting Oklahoma State. They beat ranked Kansas State, so there you go. Minnesota at Northwestern could be bad for them, seeing that they lost their playoff hopes there. So could be just a big letdown for Minnesota. Baylor at Texas worries me a little after that gut-wrenching loss that they had. Kent State hosting Ball State after that crazy comeback versus Buffalo. You know, that was insane. Last week on Thursday for your Maction. All right, time for some get-up spots. Indiana hosting Michigan after a tough Penn State game. They can get up there. Boston College at Notre Dame. Boston College is trying to make a bowl game. ASU hosting Oregon. ASU is trying to make a bowl game. Buffalo hosting Toledo. Buffalo's trying to make a bowl game. Michigan State at Rutgers. If not now, then when? Okay, so I think this win puts them at 6 to make a bowl, but Michigan State's been extremely disappointing. They need a slump buster, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Tulane versus Central Florida. This is a spot where they really need to perform here after losing outright to Temple. Arizona hosting Utah after a pathetic performance versus Oregon. But can you really bet on Arizona? I've made that mistake plenty of times and keep kicking myself every time I do. They're like the Tampa Bay of college football when it comes to betting. Charlotte hosting Marshall, trying to make a bowl game. Fresno State hosting Nevada, trying to make a bowl game. NC State at Georgia Tech. They can still make a bowl game if they beat Georgia Tech, and I believe they might have someone like Miami on deck or something. Look ahead spots. Wisconsin looking past Purdue to Minnesota. Minnesota looking past Northwestern to Wisconsin. Very possible. Cincinnati looking past Temple to Memphis is very possible. Georgia Tech looking past NC State to Georgia. Very possible. They're not going to make a bowl game here, so could be very flat. Michigan looking past Indiana to Ohio State. Very possible and dangerous. Notre Dame looking past Boston College to Stanford. Virginia could be looking past Liberty to Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech could be looking past Pittsburgh to Virginia. So these are all some serious look-ahead spots. Possibly could fade these teams. I'll tell you this, it would take a lot for me to bet any of those teams in these look-ahead spots. It would take a pretty sweet-ass line for me to take a look at that. All right, it's time to get into my Big Ten power ratings. All right. And we're going to start right away with the top team, Ohio State. And to be honest with you, I had to upgrade them again. I think I'm a little low on them. A lot of power ratings have them at 35 points better than the average team, 36. I only had them at 30.5. And to be honest with you, they were up 49-7 against Rutgers early in the third. They could have won by 80 if they wanted to. Remember, we bet it because they were going to bench all their players, and they did. And Rutgers scored a few garbages at the end. I upgraded them to 32.5, 2-point upgrade. ESPN downgrades them a little bit by 33.9, and Team Rankings downgrades them a little bit down to 39.4. And this is why you can't just go by pure statistics. This is why there's an art to it, not just a science. You know that Ohio State benched their players, but a lot of these rating sites use pure stats and yards allowed and stuff like that. They don't factor in that half the time it was your second string. So just remember that when you come up with your own power ratings. And that's why you should trust your own power ratings as number one if you do a proper job. Penn State downgraded a half point. Indiana kind of gave them some fits, 17.5 down to 17. They actually took them down back to fourth place, too, because I had to upgrade Michigan and Wisconsin, both covering the spread. Michigan dominated. Obviously, Michigan State just destroyed them. We were on Michigan, as you remember. And Wisconsin, they covered in a tough environment against Nebraska. And I can't really put Michigan again over Wisconsin when Wisconsin just beat them so bad. But at the same time, if gun to the head, if they were playing each other on a neutral field, I would probably hold my nose, shut my eyes, and bet Michigan. I think they're so close right now. We'll see how they finish out their schedule because Wisconsin gets to go to Minnesota soon after they play Purdue, and Michigan's got Ohio State on deck after Indiana. See if they slip up against Indiana. This can all change. Minnesota, to be honest with you, their kicker kind of screwed them. They had to call a timeout. They outgained the hell out of Iowa. I almost upgraded them in my power ratings for even through the loss, but I kept them at 14.5. ESPN smart enough to upgrade them looking at the yards to 14, and Team Rankings upgraded them a little to 12.6. Iowa, I still have them at 13.5 because they were outgained so much. ESPN has them at 14.6, Team Rankings 15.9. Indiana, I upgraded from 7.5 to 8.25 for covering against Penn State. ESPN upgrades them to 8.3, Team Rankings to 9.6. Now, I downgraded the hell out of Michigan State because they deserved it. They went from 9 to 8. Well, I guess not the hell, right? I just downgraded them a point, but ESPN has them also at 8.1, Team Rankings 8.8. And I'm not even sure if I'm low enough on this team. They're so injured, and they just can't seem to score. They lost to Illinois recently. There you go.
Unreal.
Nebraska. Actually upgraded them from 4.5 to 5. They pretty much tied Wisconsin in yards, but Wisconsin let off the gas, and they let them kind of, march down the field a few times. But at the same time, I saw something in this team, and they're just kind of finally rounding the corner again. They were injured. They had some really good execution. I'm hoping they can do this on the road as well. ESPN upgrades them slightly to 1.2, and Team Rankings upgrades them slightly to 2.5. I'm higher than them. I have Nebraska at 5. Illinois, bye week, keep them at 3.25. Purdue, bye week, keep them at 2.5. Northwestern, they covered versus the worst team in football. And I think the books got middled on this one, actually, because I think they beat UMass by 41 points. And I think they were losing almost at the end of the first quarter there. They blocked a field goal and scored on it. It's just pathetic. I can't downgrade them anymore. I'm at 0. ESPN has them at negative 4.3 still, but we'll see if they can do anything against Minnesota this week. Maryland, no play, no change, minus 3.5, and Rutgers covered against a fake Ohio State team. So no upgrade for me there, Rutgers. Apologize for that. No apologies for that. All right. Now it is time for your free play for college football week 13. And I am just going right back to the well on this one because why the hell would you not? This team's been covering like a champ, and the same shit's been happening last week. Or the week before. They were on bye week last week. You saw Illinois' spread go from 11 to 12 to 13 to 14 to 15, and then we hit Illinois against Michigan State, sprinkled that money line, and they beat Michigan State outright. Well, guess what? They're on a bye week, and now they're going to Iowa, and the spread starts at 12.5, 13.5, 14, 14.5, 15. Had to hit it. Had to hit Illinois. I don't love betting on teams that have a bye when they're hot. But at the same time, Lovey's got these guys believing they're going to make a bowl game. They have 6 wins. And to be honest with you, they're not out of the Big Ten West because if they beat Iowa, Minnesota loses, and Wisconsin loses Purdue, they went out and they're in. So there's literally a shot. And Lovey went on I saw him on his press conference just recently today talk about that. So I believe in this Illinois team, and Iowa, they don't necessarily just blow teams out the doors. Illinois is much improved, and even if they're down by 20, 21 points, 22, you can possibly count on a backdoor touchdown here. All right. Illinois started out terrible. They obviously beat Akron, but only beat Connecticut by 7 points, lost outright to Eastern Michigan, then started playing better, only lost by 4, home against Nebraska, went to Minnesota and lost, then something clicked in them against the Michigan team. They covered against Michigan. It was actually 28-25 in the fourth there. Then they beat Wisconsin, they beat Purdue, they smoke Rutgers, and then they win outright at Michigan State. I have no reason to not cover them as 15-point dogs against Iowa. I think Iowa does win this game, but I don't think it's going to be by 15 points. So you have a nice little cushion there. And don't forget that Iowa is in a letdown spot after taking out undefeated Minnesota, and they have Nebraska on deck. Let's get into a little fantasy football with our guy D Nasty. And now it is time for a little fantasy football week 12 with our guy D Nasty. This episode is being brought to you by Thrive Fantasy DFS. For a $10 bonus, please visit theoddsbreakers.com/thrive-DFS, your fantasy connection for prop betting. How you doing, Dave? How's Fantasyland treating you?
Good. How about you?
Not too bad. I mean, I won the important league last week. I'm 9-1 in your league, and I think I lost, but I don't care because I'm number 1 in the playoffs there. That's not the important one. I'm kind of treading in the cock blockers, our league, my league, and I'm kind of on the fringe of making the playoffs there. So I'm kind of hoping. I think I won this week, so that's good. But I have a little work to do here. We have 2 weeks left. Everybody that's on the fringe of making playoffs better be paying attention because there's a lot going on in the NFL, isn't there, Dave?
Definitely.
And
do or die time for fantasy's time.
It is do or die. These next 2 weeks are, I think, the biggest weeks. You get to the playoffs. Sometimes you get paid anyway. You make third place, fourth. A lot of leagues play off fourth. Some play through sixth. It's do or die here to make the playoffs. Otherwise, you are on the outside left in. So let's get right into it. And I think this is the last week of bye weeks, isn't it, Dave?
It is. I can go through those right now. Last week of buys, NFL Week 12. First bye we have is the Cardinals. Kyler Murray's been on fire lately, so if you've been starting him, you're going to have to definitely bench him this week, unfortunately. So Kyler Murray, David Johnson, Kenyon Drake, and then also Fitzgerald or Christian Kirk. So there's quite a few people on the Cardinals, actually, even though they don't have that good of a record, they actually have quite a few fantasy studs on their team, especially Kyle Murray. So get him on your bench. The Chiefs. So actually a pretty loaded week this week. The Chiefs, Pat Mahomes, my homie. So you got to get him on your bench this week, and all the receivers and all the running backs for them as well. So McCoy, Damian Williams, Tyreek Hill, maybe Sammy Watkins possibly. Hopefully you're not starting him though, but definitely all. And then Travis Kelce, a big, huge one for a lot of people, one of the best tight ends. So a lot of people on the Chiefs that you'd be starting as well. Chargers, probably not as many people on the Chargers, but there is a few still there. Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen, so Hunter Henry. So there's quite a few there still. Vikings, you probably have quite a few on them too. Thielen's still out, but if you were starting him, you probably weren't starting him, but he's injured right now. But Diggs, you got Dalvin Cook, one of the top running backs right now.
Dalvin Cook is huge, man. And Kirk Cousins been a beast the last 5 or 6 weeks for the most part. Oh, and Kansas City just scored again to Kelsey. As we're recording this, you mentioned Kansas City and the Chargers have a bye, and the Monday night game's on, and I have it on the screen right now. And Kansas City's up 23-9 now, but some huge fantasy implications here for this week, isn't there, man? Like you said, I mean, look at the guys on the Chiefs. Look at the guys on the Chargers here. You know, the Vikings, the Cardinals. Kyler Murray's fantastic. You know, and so I think this week is almost as big as last week, even though there's 6 teams last week. You agree?
I agree. Yeah, and there's like some more higher impact guys this week, so this one can even be more of an impact to your team this week, possibly, because there's a lot of studs this week on some of the teams that have byes. Absolutely, man.
Well, let's get right into key injuries here, Dave, and I'll start out this time. Marlon Mack, he's not the return of the Mack this week because he's going to miss his Thursday game with a fractured hand. He's week to week, and a lot of times running backs, get a little cast. They can play through it, but I don't know, man. You got to grip the ball. I see him being out a couple weeks personally. I think that sucks for good old Marlon Mack here. So he's been a beast on my team too. So I'm going to have to definitely fill in here, but we have some pickups for you for that. Auden Tate had a nasty neck injury. I don't know if he's day to day or week to week. I think he'll play, but he got carted off. So there's a chance he misses next week, just kind of precautionary. So Auden Tate for the Bengals there. Philip Dorsett. I believe he got a head injury for the Patriots, and that's not good. The Patriots already, getting lower on pass catchers. James Conner, his AC joint started hurting again, and they took him out. He's going to be questionable coming into this week. I think that's just kind of that nasty injury that keeps nagging him. Worried about him. Juju Smith-Schuster had a concussion, so we'll have to monitor his status. Deontay Johnson also had a concussion. Monitor his status. Mitch Trubisky, his feelings were hurt, and so he's probably out next game. But I don't know if you know.
Goes like Darnold.
Nagy pulled him out, and I think it was just to try to shift the blame from his horrid play calling. Because if Mitch really got hurt in the second quarter, like he claimed, why the hell is Nagy running an option play on 3rd and 1 to the short side of the field, which Mitch completely just blew? But you shouldn't be running that play on 3rd and 1 anyway. And then Nagy pulls him out. I think it was kind of just like, save my job here, Mitch. I don't know what it was, but there's nothing hurt about Mitch in my opinion. I just think he works for a bunch of liars. Josh Oliver for Jacksonville, he's a tight end. He fractured a couple bones in his back a little bit. He'll be out a few weeks. Robert Woods was a surprise inactive against the Bears, and he has some personal dealings. I don't know what's going on, some family stuff. Hope everything's okay. And a couple I wanted to mention that will be back. Evan Ingram should be back this week against the Bears. And T.Y. Hilton should be back this week as well. Well, it's close, so be monitoring him, Dave. Who have I missed?
Well, for Ingram, actually, they just updated his status today. He did not practice again today, so definitely keep an eye on that. That might come down to a game-time decision, so definitely keep an eye on Ingram. Then Josh Hill for the Saints, the tight end for them, suffered a concussion. And then just one other one I had was Deebo Samuel, who we're going to talk about here shortly. He had a shoulder injury, but he did come back in, it looked like. So just keep an eye on him, too, and just in case it does act up, and he might be a game-time decision as well, but I do think he will play this week.
Against the Packers, and also big game, and Emmanuel Sanders was taken out of the game for a while too because his injuries nagged up. So there's a nice little waiver wire pickup I have, and you might have the same one for that team. Why don't you get right into it, Dave, and see what you got for waivers?
All right, well, starting it off, Deebo Samuel, the guy we were just talking about. Actually, last week he showed up with an 8-catch, 112-yard performance, and this week 8 more catches for 134 yards. Looks like this guy is for real. If he's out there, definitely pick him up. With Sanders is banged up too, like Kiev was just saying. Definitely got to take a look at him. And then we do have a couple running backs for the Colts, actually. Return of the Mac is not returning, and he'll be out for at least a week, they said, for sure this week. So you definitely have a guy you can play this week in either Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Williams. Jonathan Williams is a young running back, 5th-round pick from the Bills. He looked good when he was in there this past week. And then Nyheim Hines will get quite a few.
You pronounce it Nyheim Hines. I know it's one of those pain in the ass ones. Go ahead.
Anyways, Hines will get quite a few catches though. So if you're in a PPR league, definitely look at Hines. If you're just in a TD league or just looking for yards wise, the first 3 down back is going to be Williams. So those 2 guys are worth a pickup this week, and they can both get a lot of work this week as well. And definitely in PPR leagues, you're going to definitely want Hines. Another guy this week that you might be wanting to look at and picking up for some of the buys, Darius Geis. He's actually looked pretty good this past week, scored on a touchdown. He had a nice big screen pass that he scored on. So definitely a guy, he's taken over some of the carries for Adrian Peterson. I look for him to even get more involved this week as well. So he's rostered in 76% of leagues right now. But if someone did drop him, definitely pick him up. He's a guy you're going to want to pick up for sure this week. Another guy with a difficult name that I'm not sure how to pronounce, Bo Scarborough. Was a past Cowboy, and he did actually look very good this week. He could be the starting going forward for the rest of the year instead of Ty Johnson. So definitely a guy you want to pick up this week as well. He had 14 carries this week with 55 yards and a touchdown. So definitely a guy you want to keep in mind for the bye week fill-ins. And then Jeff Driscoll. He's actually been playing very well for Matt Stafford. I'm not sure what the Stafford is looking like for this week for status-wise, but definitely a guy you want to take a look at as well is Jeff Driscoll. He's been actually playing well and putting up some nice fantasy points the last couple weeks, and he's got a favorable schedule going forward as well, so definitely take a look at him. And then a guy that I did like at the beginning of the year, but he tallied up, and now he's coming back on like gangbusters, Noah Fant. He's back off a bye. He had a nice game this past week. He had a 75-yard catch and run last week, and then he had 31-yard catch this past Sunday. He's definitely looking really good. He had four catches for 60 yards and 11 targets, which is huge. So definitely if you're looking for a tight end fill-in for Kelsey or anyone else that's on bye this week, he's the guy you want to pick up. And then a couple flyers then too you might want to take a look at. Tim Patrick, big, tall wide receiver. He's out most of the year. I had him on one of my dynasty leagues last year. He's a big guy. He's fast. He looked very good against the Vikings this week. If you're looking for help at wide receiver, Tim Patrick is a guy you might want to take a look at, especially with Emmanuel Sanders gone. They're going to go to him quite a bit more. And the last one I have here is Ryan Griffin, another tight end. Herndon is out for the rest of the year. So definitely you want to take a look at this guy. He had a huge week this last week. He hauled in 10 of 12 passes for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if you need tight end help this week, definitely Font or Griffin. Use 2 tight ends you want to pick up this week.
Yeah, I had Griffin on my top, I think. He went nuts,
He did.
Since Herndon's been out. 109 yards and a touchdown. You got to like that. But at the same time, you have to remember he played the Washington Redskins. So, I still think that the Jets figured out something with him. He's a great safety net, so he's got to be played. Bo Scarborough, 14 carries with the Lions. He kind of came out of nowhere a little bit.
He did.
I don't know if you mentioned him. He's a waiver wire guy. He's a waiver wire guy for sure. I totally agree with you on Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Williams. The problem is that they're going to be splitting the carries. I think you're right about Hines with the PPR. He's the catching back there. But I guess I prefer Nyheim Hines over Jonathan Williams, but it's not by a ton. The best thing is to maybe even stay away from that whole situation if you can. But if you have to, I would say Nyheim Hines. I might be stuck starting Nyheim Hines next week because my Delvin Cook is out and it's in the same league. So I'm going to be thinking about that one a little bit too, Nyheim Hines. Ross Dwelly, Jimmy G threw 2 touchdowns to him. So if George Kittle's still out, Dwelly is going to be that guy, possibly again. And Dave, I have Kendrick Bourne for the Niners here. He got, I think, like 7 targets and did pretty good last game. I don't know if Deebo Samuel's really banged up. He did get back in the game, but he's someone that's starting to gain popularity there. So if you're a little bit desperate, Kendrick Bourne is a guy to think of. Anthony Miller for the Bears got 11 targets last game, and I know it's Mitch throwing to him, but he has a good matchup next week, and I'm going to get into that for non-starters trending up. Kenny Stills got 7 targets for Houston. He's open a lot. And Johnny Holton is a really weird one, but I threw that out there in case Juju's out with his concussion and Deontay Johnson. If for some reason both those guys are out, it's only going to be Washington and him. And I know Mason Rudolph isn't exactly lighting it up, but if you're desperate, there you go. And I'll move right into non-starters trending up since I mentioned it. Mason Rudolph is kind of a non-starter trending up because they're playing the Bengals, and the Bengals might have the weakest defense in the whole league. Cleveland, Nick Chubb, he's playing the Dolphins. That's a possibility right there. Nick Chubb is not, and I guess he's a non-starter because Hunt's back and Chubb's had a couple bad games, but at the same time, most people are probably starting him, so maybe I shouldn't have mentioned him. Anthony Miller, I just mentioned him on the waiver wire. Janoris Jenkins is going to be on Allen Robinson next week for the Giants game. So I think with the Bears, they're going to be hitting Miller again, and he did his job last week. He caught a lot of short balls from Mitch. So I could see a PPR league or a DFS type deal. You're going to get Anthony Miller on the cheap. He might be a sneaky play for you. Jalen Samuels, he might get all the carries next week against the Bengals. Snell's out, and it looks like Connor might not be a big play next week because of his injury, his AC joint again. And against that Bengals D, Jalen Samuels could be an RB1. Monitor Connor's status. He could be a top 8 guy coming into this game. Baker Mayfield is the same thing, playing the Dolphins, right? Dallas Goedert is playing the Seahawks. The Seahawks seem to give up a lot of points at tight ends. Ryan Griffin, what you said before, Oakland's D gives up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends, Dave. So I like Ryan Griffin again this week, and I know I mentioned he played Washington, but Oakland's D isn't that great either. Ryan Griffin is a starter, in my opinion, this week. And Austin Hooper, same deal, playing Tampa. Tampa Bay is bad against tight ends themselves. Austin Hooper's a sneaky one. Love Darius Geis this week against a terrible Lions D. I think he's going to get more carries than Peterson. You might as well throw in Dwayne Haskins if you're really desperate at quarterback. I know you mentioned Driscoll, of course, but Dwayne Haskins himself is playing the Lions, and he got something going at the end towards the Jets. He scored a touchdown there. It was shocking. And, of course, you got to go with Bo Scarborough against the Redskins right there, and then Marvin Jones against the Redskins, Dave. That was a mouthful, my man.
Yeah, you covered most of the ones that I liked. A couple other ones where I liked Bourne and Deebo Samuel against the Packers. They do tend to give up big plays. They're kind of bend but don't break usually, but they've been giving up some big plays lately, so I do like those receivers. I like the Lions players, like you were saying, Driscoll, Bo Scarborough. I like both of them, like you were saying. Even Dallas Goedert, I like him, and Ertz could have a big day too. I think Hooper is actually out though. So you said Hooper for the Falcons. I don't believe he is playing though. I believe he is injured. So I don't think you might want to double check on that, on the injury for Hooper, because he did injure himself last week. And
I did. I forgot to mention that. We should monitor that. That's correct, Dave. I wrote it down but didn't even say it. So good call there.
And I do like the Buccaneers this week. Ronald Jones, he is the starter now. They did give him the job. He fell off this past week, but I do look him the rebound against the Falcons. Falcons do not have a good defense still. I look for Ronald Jones to have a big day. Jameis Winston, too. He did get a little banged up this past week, but I do think he has a big day against the Falcons. I like that matchup. And I think actually Dante Parker could have a nice day against the Browns. The Browns defense looked good this past week, but they're going to be without Garrett, and they've been bound to give up some big plays as well. So I think Parker for the Dolphins can have a big day. And Kalen Ballage, too, could actually have a big day against the Browns. And I do like all the Steelers, like you were saying, too. Deontay Johnson and James Washington. I like James Washington as a pickup this week. That's one guy I forgot to mention on my list. James Washington could be a nice pickup this week if Juju is out. So definitely keep an eye on that. And then Darius Slayton, actually, he might be a sneaky sleeper this week, too. If Shepard is out again, who knows with that concussion that he's been dealing with all year. Slayton is a sneaky good player to play this week as a non-starter against the Bears. Even though they have a tough defense, they do give up some. Their pass defenses looked a little shaky lately, so I do like Darius Slayton against them as well.
Whoever Will Fuller is covering, you should start. is what I've noticed lately with the Bears. Well, actually, I've noticed that for the last 2 years. But if Will Fuller's on Slayton, then for sure, I think Mukamara would be on Golden Tate. So maybe Slayton would be an awesome start there. That's a great call, Dave. Why don't you get right into your busts?
Bust this week, I'm going to go with the Panthers. CMC might have a down week this week, so he's a guy you've been starting in all your leagues no matter what, but just be careful this week because the Saints do have one of the top-ranked run defenses, so you might want to just take a look at that when you're playing. You have to play CMC this week, but don't be counting on him for his regular 20 or 30 points like usual, unless you're in a PPR league, so just start him with a grain of salt, but you're going to have to start him no matter what because he is a stud. And then a couple other people here, Cowboys actually. Patriots defense has been playing lights out this whole year, so I'm downgrading a few of the people on there. Amari Cooper laid an egg this past week on a couple of my teams.
Mine
here.
Too.
So, and then Michael Gallup too. I downgrade both of them against the Patriots, and then Ezekiel. He's still going to get you some solid yards, but you downgrade him from his normal amount of points. He's actually had a down year this year too. And the guy we mentioned last week, Todd Gurley, actually. He actually had a good week this week. I'm going to downgrade him, though. I think that last week was a kind of a fluke. He hasn't had that great of a year until this past week. He had a good week. I don't like him against the Ravens defense. Ravens defense has been looking pretty good, so I'm going to downgrade Gurley this week against the Ravens.
Yeah, yep. I see that as well. Absolutely. And I agree with a lot of those. I had Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott written down for there. I have Saquon Barkley against the Bears D, and to be honest with you, I don't even know if you start him here. They're going to key in on him. They kind of stopped Gurley a little bit. They got beat through the air is how they got beat. So it's so hard to not start Saquon, right? But this is just one of those, just like you said with CMC, right? Really worried about him. Marquise Brown, I'm downgrading against the Rams D. And because they've got what's-his-face from Jacksonville going to be covering him, that cornerback lost his name.
Ramsey.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey's going to be all over his ass. So, and they don't get yards. They get yards differently. They run the receivers out deep, then Lamar Jackson runs, or they have a lot of little trick plays that they run. Harbaugh's got a great offensive mind over there, so Lamar Jackson's just such a weapon. They're just going to run those guys down. I don't like Marquise Brown at all. Just like you said with the Panthers, Kyle Allen's a bust. He can be a negative point guy. I wouldn't start him on your team, Dave. And DJ Moore, you can just put him right with Kyle Allen there. And sorry to say, Dave, but Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones, I'd be very shaky to start them against the 49ers D as well, man.
I was going to say it, but I couldn't put my Packers on that list.
Got to keep your bias down when it comes to this sports betting and fantasy football. Got to keep it down. And the truth is that the Niners have a great defense, and I almost like the under in this game personally. I'm kind of eyeing it up right now. Hint, hint. This is the Niners D is just so good, and playing in San Francisco is not going to be easy. So there you go, Dave. Who is your nasty sleeper of the week that's going to make everybody win their game?
Well, since you have a lot of quarterbacks on bye, I'm going with the quarterback. My D-nasty sleeper of the week, Jeff Driscoll for the Detroit Lions.
Wow.
He's my D-nasty sleeper of the week.
That's a bold one, Dave. That's a bold one. He played okay yesterday against the Cowboys, didn't he? So, like it. That's an ugly one. That's certainly an ugly one.
He finished with 31.5 fantasy points this past week.
He did. But that was also at home. But yeah, the Lions playing the Redskins, so yeah, you should be okay there. Nasty sleeper for me is Jalen Samuels against the Bengals. I don't think they're going to run Connor much. I think Samuels is going to get a ton of yards. I'm thinking over. I also like him on a yards prop if you can find it. Jalen Samuels right there is going to be my nasty sleeper of the week, Dave. Well, any last things to add?
No, good luck, everyone. To do or die times. You make sure you get your lineups in and make sure you get your pickups in too so you can win this week.
All right. A huge thanks to Dave D. Nasty for coming on the show and breaking down fantasy football. Everyone have a fantastic week. Remember to start your players and go get some winners.